that if the international community opens the door for North, the North Korea will continue to take the step towards peace. And South Korean President Moon also said that South Korea will also continue to exhort its efforts in helping North Korea as well. He also briefly mentioned the East Asian Railroad community and also updated the international leaders on the latest developments between the railroad connection between the two Koreas. He also said that it's currently underway and also asked for cooperation and support from the international community. President Moon also mentioned the human rights and the women's rights, and he mentioned the Japanese military comfort women issue as well. He said South Korea will actively participate in talks on women, peace, and security, and said that South Korea will continue to walk in this path to solve these issues around the world.
And Professor Bong, I was listening to the speech just there, and I'm wondering whether you thought we learned anything new from what President Moon had to say. To me, at least, it sounded similar to what he was saying straight after returning to Seoul from his time in North Korea. Nothing much new there at all.
Right. I mean, he reiterated main points. That he, told the entire nation and the world in the aftermath of his, meeting with Chairman Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang. But I see the slight but the real contrast between his position he expressed in the 2017 address in the UN General Assembly meeting, which is last year, and this time his position on the same issues in this year's address. Although in both addresses, the last year's and this year's, he emphasized the United Nations role as very important to help bring sustainable peace and denuclearization of North Korea. But his definition of the role of the United Nations, the international community, are portrayed in different ways. In last year's address, he emphasized the very resolute actions, united front of the international community to condemn North Korea's provocation, including the 6th nuclear test and another missile test that it was in transgression of the international community's wish for peace on the Korean Peninsula. And he highly praised the United Nations Security Council's resolutions that was made an unusual immediacy and the speed. So he agreed that in order to help North Korean regime to make the right decisions, we need to bring stronger sanctions and pressure on North Korea. So basically, he defined the United Nations role in terms of bringing pressure and sanctions on North Korea so that North Korean leadership would be making the right decisions. In his last year's speech, but in this year's speech, he also emphasized the role of the United Nations extremely important. But this time, the role of the United Nations is to respond to the new choices and effort made by the North Korean leadership in the direction of economic development.
So do you think he's referring to sanctions there, saying...
Basically, he's arguing, make a case that North Korean leadership has expressed its clear willingness to go in the direction of economic development as opposed to nuclear and missile development. And I confirm the genuine intention of the top leadership of North Korea in the last meeting with the Chairman Kim Jong-un. So it is time for the entire international community, United Nations included, to respond to North Korea's new direction. This can be interpreted that South Korean government is basically making an argument on behalf of North Korea that since North Korea has sufficiently demonstrated its genuine willingness to go in the direction of economic development, the existing economic sanctions on North Korea decided at the United Nations Security Council with a series of resolutions may need to be changed. He also mentioned his proposal to create the railroad, Northeast Asian railroad community. But without lifting the UN Security Council resolution, especially the resolution 2375, which bars any joint ventures or the railroad reconnection projects, as defined in its Article 18.
Well, do you see
his vision of Northeast Asian railroad community cannot bear fruit?
Well, do you see any way that that message will get through to the UN Security Council, that he's saying, look, I'm trying to engage with Pyongyang now. There's a clear 12-month period where they haven't been testing any nuclear bombs. They haven't set off any ballistic missiles. Now it's your turn to kind of loosen the sanctions a bit on North Korea.
Right, but I would like to listen to the Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho of North Korea speech, because without Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho actually corroborating the main points addressed by South Korean President Moon Jae-in, that North Korean leadership has indeed made a strategic decision to abandon its nuclear warheads and intercontinental ballistic missile, not just promises of dismantling partial facilities like facilities in Yongbyon or Dongchangri missile engine sites, not complete and verifiable denuclearization. Would it be enough? Would it be enough for the United Nations Security Council to cancel at least some of the major economic sanctions, resolutions on North Korea? Would it be enough for the United Nations, international community, to lift part of existing economic sanctions in return for North Korea's verbal promises, not concrete actions? I believe that the United Nations Security Council would like to see the completion of concrete steps of denuclearization taken by North Korea before it decides to lift at least part of economic sanctions, including the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2375, which prohibits any joint ventures or the major economic projects. So the question is whether the words delivered by Chairman Kim Jong-un to South Korean President Moon Jae-in at the summit meeting, that North Korea has crossed the line of no return, that North Korea will only move toward economic development further away and away from nuclear weapons and missiles, that is up to the United Nations Security Council and South Korea's ally, including the United States, to decide whether there will be enough for them to decide to lift economic sanctions in existence.
Well, President Trump will be very aware that he does not want his policy of maximum pressure on North Korea undermined. He said during his speech at the UN General Assembly just a couple of days ago very, very clearly that the sanctions will stay in place until there is this complete, irreversible and verified denuclearization, and we're not anywhere near that point right now. Ji-won, just bringing you back in briefly, because we have this news this morning that Mike Pompeo is planning to head to Pyongyang this time. His last arranged meeting was abruptly cancelled by President Trump because Trump said, look, the North Korean regime isn't doing enough to denuclearize, but we hear that he's heading back there in October. And also, if you could tell us any more about this potential second summit that will come up between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Sure, Mark. Pompeo, in an interview with CBS this morning on Wednesday, said that he would be going to Pyongyang soon, but he did not give us any specific date. And about the second summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump, he said that it may happen in October, but that it's more likely to happen sometime after that. And just to update you on the latest between the talks between the two sides, Mark, Secretary Pompeo uploaded, he just tweeted a few hours ago that he had a meeting with North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho. He called the meeting a very positive one, and he said that the two discussed upcoming summit and next steps towards denuclearization of North Korea. Right. And about that, the denuclearization steps, Pompeo said that the U.S. is currently working diligently with the North Korean officials to set the conditions right so that they can accomplish as much as possible during their second possible summit. And he also said that about the verification of North Korea's denuclearization, he said they're not going to buy, quote, a pig in a poke, and that the U.S. is going to get this right and deliver the very commitments North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made to the world.
Professor Bong, I'd like to get your feelings about this tentatively scheduled second summit between Washington and Pyongyang. The first was really derided by President Trump's critics, who said it was a bit of a failure, really, a letdown, because there were no concrete agreements made with the North in terms of its denuclearization. A lot of people said it was like a propaganda win for the North Korean regime in a lot of ways. Do you imagine that the second will be a lot more constructive between the two sides?
I would think so. I mean, President Trump will be working harder to tighten the loose ends this time. In the second meeting with Chairman Kim Jong-un, because the main purpose of the first meeting, according to President Donald Trump himself, was to just get the chemistry between the leaders and confirm the basic roadmaps lying between the two countries. So this time, how to walk that, according to the roadmap that was supposedly decided between the two leaders in the Singapore summit in June, will be the main focus of the second meeting between Trump and Kim. Although in his United Nations General Assembly speech, President Trump praised the outcomes coming out of the Singapore summit meeting, saying that the missiles and rockets are no longer flying in every direction, and nuclear testing has stopped. So some military facilities are already being dismantled. Our hostages have been released. I would like to thank Chairman Kim for his courage and for the steps that he has taken. But he quickly added that much work needs to be done. That is that unless North Korean leadership would carry out additional concrete step toward final and fully verified denuclearization, such as the list of all nuclear warheads, materials, and the facilities and programs that North Korea has produced and maintained, or at least the transfer of the weapon materials and the missile parts out of the country by a specific timetable, then the United States will not be so eager to begin to lift the existing economic sanctions, including series of the United Nations Security Council resolutions. So, although South Korea and the United States have very diligently reiterated that there is no daylight, there is no fissure between the two allies, but I see a gap, at least a gap of perceptions between the two allies to see how to balance inducing North Korea further in the direction of economic development, letting North Korea pass the point of no return. No way North Korean leadership would go back to the resort to the nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missiles to try to get what it wants. And maintaining the pressure on North Korea so that North Korea will not be relapsing into the same temptations in favor of maintaining nuclear weapons and missiles. But United States' position is far stronger and more strict than South Korea's in terms of using the card of economic sanctions.
Right, and just we are running out of time, but briefly, with the US midterms coming up in November, do you imagine that the Trump administration will try to schedule this second summit between Kim and Trump before that to give the perception at least of a major foreign policy win for the US president? Definitely,
right. I would say that it is highly likely for the second meeting between Trump and Kim will take place before the midterm election in early November. But I like to caution the viewers that it has been rather too exaggerated or overstated that the United States is so preoccupied with using this diplomatic success with regard to nuclear missile issues with North Korea that United States is so willing to listen to whatever demands North Korean regime would make in order to make the other summit meetings between the leaders successful in every way. But I think the correlation between the midterm election in the United States and the United States dealing with nuclear North Korea is not as strong as North Koreans or other observers might believe. Right. Well, we also heard President Trump speak quite a lot about Iran in his speech as well. So he's not just focused on what's happening in Pyongyang. Unfortunately, that's where we are going to leave it for now. Thank you ever so much to our Iji-won and Professor Bong for joining us in the studio at this very early hour of a Thursday morning. We have been watching President Moon Jae-in give his second speech to the UN General Assembly, and we'll have much, much more on that during our next newscast that's coming up at 7 a.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.
If you're on Jeju-do Island, our FM frequencies are 88.7 in Jeju City.